Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place going over the latest in movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, a couple people who know their way around King Street. It's Amanda the Jedi and Arturo Zurita. Thanks for
Cheers.
being here to talk about the Toronto International Film Festival. Even though not all of us made the way out to Toronto this year, Arturo, you got to observe from afar while we met up at Hey Lucy's and exchanged tickets for Midnight Madness screenings. But you also got to dip your toe into some of the movies that Toronto had to offer, even though you stayed home from Chicago. How many TIFF movies do you think you ended up catching in total by the end?
67 movies. I had I'm playing with y'all, bro. Can you imagine?
Fuck you, man.
The way he's negotiating for those scooter links, though, it wouldn't have been that big.
I was like, come on, let's go.
He's just counting every single short.
Yeah,
they had me as the Megalopolis guy going up to be the person who points out. No, I tried to stick to the.
He was too tall. No offense.
I wouldn't even be able to be seen.
He was unusually tall, the man they brought out on stage.
They would have been like, where he's at. No, I stuck to a lot of international films. So the I in TIFF, that's mostly what they sent me. Everything else, if I had a screening thing, I'm waiting on the horizon. But I was able to catch some, like The Substance, which Zach is catching later today, which I think is definitely going to be one that breaks into his top for sure. But no, it was interesting to catch some little small ones there, and hopefully a lot of those get premiered in Chicago as well. But I just saw y'all logging it, added a bunch of my watches as well.
Nice.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of logging on Letterboxd, a lot of just watching, trying to pack in as many movies as we could into the week plus long festival. I think I ended up with 33 movies over the course of 9 days during my duration at TIFF. Amanda, I know you were probably somewhere around there as well. But,
yeah, there's a couple of screeners I need to log, but I think I'm at 27 on Letterboxd right now, which is kind of low for me.
But the watch times though.
I did. I saw a lot of the really long ones.
The logged hours.
Megalopolis actually destroyed me, so we took some breaks. We took a couple.
Yeah, that counts for 3.
In there.
A couple extra trips to Gabby's and other of the fine Toronto eateries this year. But it was, as you mentioned, a year that had a lot of long movies, from The Brutalist to Megalopolis to Seat of the Sacred Fig. Even Anora and The Substance are pushing around 2.5 hours long. So
yeah, I did the math. Megalopolis was the 6th longest movie I saw, and I might have missed something else. That was just me looking at the ones that I knew were long.
That's insane.
Yeah, a lot of hefty cinema this year at the Toronto International Film Festival. But Amanda, now that we've gone through it all, experienced it all, I'm wondering, because this is your, I think, 6th time going to the festival, something like that. What's the story of this year's TIFF to you? What stood out? What felt new? What felt the same? What was your big takeaway from all of the stuff we did in Toronto?
Okay, there's no Bulgari ad, and that really hurt.
Nothing to clap along to. We were struggling with the piracy ad.
We were. To be fair, the midnight screenings were going all in. So they were clapping for Varda. They were clapping for the intro. So for my final screening of the festival was Friendship, and Peter actually came out and introduced it. So it was like, we're doing midnight at 3:30, you know? And people clapped along.
This recession.
It was really good. You know, we liked it. It was a good time for that, and I wanted a little bit more of that. So I feel like there was a little bit less audience participation in some of the stuff that I expect, and I think it's because there was so many new commercials. People didn't quite know how to break into it, or maybe less people going to the midnight screenings coming to the regular screenings. But that was really that lacked a little bit. This is also the first year that, other than the year that it was coming back from COVID, that every theater was assigned seating. So even Scotia was all assigned seating this year, and I think that kind of made it a little bit harder for rush. So instead of trying to pack people in, they weren't letting a lot of rush in as much. Even in the bigger theaters, if they couldn't kind of stick you out of the way, they weren't letting you walk in front of people to disturb them. I saw a little bit more of it in Lightbox and Scotia for kind of letting people be a burden to the people that were already sitting, but it was a little bit weird there. I know that like less people got in on rush than they normally do. It was nice to have the reserved seating in the other theaters. Like on one hand, you could end up with like a really crappy seat that you're stuck with, but on the other hand, you know before you get there, so you really can just schedule your screenings more back to back than you could have before, because you'd be worried about getting to the next screening and then not having a good spot. So that was a little nice. I feel like people were getting a little bit hostile with it towards the end. A lot of people with bad seats were waiting until that 15-minute cutoff time and then lying and saying they were part of Rush and just sitting in better seats. And that was going to start some
I had that
fights.
back here too, bro. I was like, come on. Lady was taking my seat. I was like, this is ridiculous. Screener's
Yeah.
late.
That's what I
What was
mean.
the best theater?
Yeah. I feel like I feel like TIFF 1 and TIFF 2 kind of just have like Lightbox, just have the good vibes. I always like seeing stuff in Wales, but some of it's like I would say the most comfortable is probably Bell 1. Like, no, it's not Bell anymore. Sorry, TIFF 1. It is funny. I knew someone was going to mess up because the new presenting partner is Rogers, and it was Norm. Norm messed up and said presented by Bell, and then everyone was like, Rogers, and he was like, oh. Oh, they told me not to do that. And I was like, it took one day. It took one day for someone to screw that one up. So, and they're
it's
for
hard
people that aren't
remembering all
Canadian,
those corporate sponsors.
I believe it, but people who aren't Canadian, like they're competing companies. That's
Yeah.
like Coke and Pepsi. That would be like
I was
saying,
about
oh,
to
brought
say,
to you
yeah.
by Pepsi when it was like Coke sponsored. So that was kind of funny. Luckily, it was one of the smaller indie movies, but still, seeing as it was Norm and he's kind of a big deal there, he should have known better. But what else? I don't know. It was good. I
Yeah.
feel like the movies were good this year. It was really solid. There was just like a couple things that worked a little bit differently that changed the vibes a bit, but not in a bad way. Like Chase, it was his first year and he had a great time until this very last
Mhm.
day. He was doing great
I
until
thought
today.
He was the one who changed the vibes.
He was, yeah. No, he was great. He was he was just always happy. He eats so fast, not in a mean way, but it was like impressive. I'd be like, oh my
Chase?
God, you already ate your
Got plates
pizza.
enough.
That's incredible. Such a good guy. I love
Good
him.
boy.
He's a
Yeah.
good boy.
Chase definitely added a certain je ne sais quoi to our adventures at the festival. I'm sure we can
Yeah.
talk to him about it more later in the week. I'm excited to do that. But yeah, I mean, it did feel in a lot of ways like a return to norms in some way after a couple COVID altered years, and then last year being held in the middle of the work stoppages. So a lot of the SAG talent and WGA talent were returning to the festival for the first time in a bit at this year's edition. And beyond all that, it just felt like a deep roster of lineups of
For
films
sure.
at the festival. We weren't like searching that hard to try and find stuff. It was more about, can you fit everything that you want to see in to the festival
Yeah.
this year?
Yeah, that's
Um,
exactly it.
You mentioned some hostilities among the seat selections. Also, just some hostilities generally. More protests that I've ever seen at a film festival at this year's festival. Whether it was an opening night protest at Nutcrackers that was protesting RBC's involvement with the festival in relation to the ongoing war in Gaza, or if it was the protests of the BB Files documentary that were by Israelis but against Netanyahu, or the protests of the Ukrainian protesters who were protesting the documentary Russians at War. Also, Pharrell getting protested because he's the head of Louis Vuitton.
That was a funny video.
And he
I
tried.
had
He
seen
really
it.
tried.
I had seen a video. He should get protested for what he did to his boy. Hopefully, this is back up on top. For what he did to his boy and trying to make that documentary or his biopic without including his buddy, who technically made him with the Neptunes. If you know, you know. But there was one video Zach had posted from one of the screenings, and then I saw Zach from a different angle from someone else who posted it. It was like Vantage Point. Y'all had more protests than Q&As.
I
A
know.
little bit.
Oh,
Yeah, it was it certainly added an interesting layer to the festival. And we often like go into these things a bit apolitically, and it's just a reminder of the politics that is sort of involved in almost everything and every movie that's here. But ultimately we are going to talk about what we think about these movies just on artistic levels and what entertained us and stuff like that. We do have a super chat from Wiley. Shout out to Wiley, one of our patrons here on Intercut, talking about if any movies had banger needle drops at the festival. Always nice to get a good needle drop in your movie, and there are always
A lot.
movies that have some good ones. The one that's coming to mind for me right now is Yellow from Coldplay in the middle of Bird.
Yeah.
Was like a
Bird had
pretty
a
fun
couple.
one.
Bird has a
Bird
couple.
was full of
The
really
song
good
it's
music. Yeah.
the song it starts on is really good too. I can't. Why can't I remember what the song's called though? But
Sandstorm.
it's like a newer British punk song. It was good. I just can't remember what it was right now. But yeah, that one had a good needle drop. Now I'm sorry. I don't know why I said
Yeah,
it.
it's the kind of
but
thing.
it's there.
It's no. It's the kind of thing where like I feel
You
like
guys
it's
knew
hard to
Wiley was
even-
gonna ask. Y'all
Right.
needed to. Be...
It's doing my best.
But
substance
yeah, I mean
score
the one that was full of
was
the most bangers in terms of needle drops had to have been Piece by Piece, the Pharrell biopic, right? I mean that
Of
his
course.
career is full of bangers.
We'll see.
What?
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean there's a montage in there that will have you like wondering if there's a hit song that Pharrell didn't have his fingers in. I my big takeaway from watching Piece by Piece is that even though I'm like he doesn't necessarily make a lot of the music that I consider like my favorite, I wonder if there's anybody who's made a greater quantity of songs that I like than Pharrell. That dude has produced so much interesting music. But yeah, let's start our TIFF talk with the People's Choice Award winners, because that's one of the big things that TIFF where you can see TIFF sort of impact is in the movies that get selected from People's Choice often end up being major players when it comes to the Oscars. In fact, the last 12 consecutive winners of People's Choice were all Oscar nominated for Best Picture. 3 of them even won Best Picture, which is why the prize ultimately going to The Life of Chuck came as a big surprise to a lot of people this year. The new film from Mike Flanagan, starring a host of interesting actors, including Tom Hiddleston, Mark Hamill, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, Jacob Tremblay, is adapted from a Stephen King short story. And, you know, despite the involvement of Mike Flanagan and Stephen King, this is more of like a existentialist drama, a bit of like a coming of age story told in different parts. It feels almost anthological. And this movie still has no US distributor. It has no release date. So it's
No, it got
almost
picked up
hard
last night,
to...
didn't it?
Oh, that would be news to me.
I'm sorry, maybe it didn't. Maybe I just assumed that. Okay, no, I might have been making things up. Friendship just got picked up, but
Yeah,
I think
Friendship
Life
got-
of Chuck is in like a. I assume it's in a bidding war. I assume for
It
Life of
has to
Chuck,
be
they're
at this
probably
point.
bidding behind the scenes.
Yeah, so it's just a
Right.
rare scenario where like this movie, like it might not enter the Oscars race just because it might not get released this year. You know, we
Oh
don't
yeah.
really know what's going to happen to this movie yet. I also feel like despite this being like a good, enjoyable, crowd pleasing movie, I would be maybe a little bit surprised to see it become like some kind of Oscars juggernaut. You know, not that there isn't place for movies that can be feel good, but I almost feel like it would enter in like a coda territory where like it's good, but it's not what we necessarily traditionally think of as an Oscars style movie. But just the movie, to talk about the movie itself, this is a really interesting film from Mike Flanagan. As we mentioned, it is this like existentialist drama of sorts that has all these different layers and aspects to the story. Amanda, I know this was one that was high on your anticipated list. What did you think about The Life of Chuck?
I thought it was really good. I'm a big Flanagan fan. Anybody who watches my channel knows that. So I know he can handle emotions really well. Most of his horror still packs an emotional gut punch a lot of the time, which I feel like he's been steering into outside House of Usher, even more so over the years with the last few he had done before House of Usher. So I knew he was going to do this well, and I feel like very few people can toe the line of having this much existential dread being like the beginning of a movie and then still managing to round it out to like the things in life that really matter and still leaving it as this emotional gut punch by the end of it, in a way that's really beautiful. I do think that maybe some of the dance sequences go on like a little bit too long, but I can totally get it if you've got somebody who's as talented and willing to do it as Tom Hiddleston.
Tom Hiddleston.
he was dancing
Aw.
up a storm. I like it when the kid's dancing though. Actually, like when I feel like when he's younger. Yeah, it's like
Is it a
I
musical?
like the kid. No, no, it's
It's
not
not
at
a
all.
musical, but there's a lot of dancing in it.
It's kind of like the idea is kind of like the things that make up a life and the things that make a life worth living. And this guy just gets a lot of joy from dancing, and it's just kind of pieces of his life that build into
Yeah.
Okay.
his grandmother teaching him how to, and all the little things. Uh, that just build into there's things you can be good at, there's things that can matter in the world, and then there's the things that someone can tell you don't matter that are actually the only reasons worth living. So really, really, it a lot of tears, a lot of sniffles. I think
Mhm.
there's probably some people it's not going to work for in some ways, but I do think that this is going to be one that like on repeat watches is going to hit like even harder. Even when you're watching it, you're kind of piecing together what's happening, and they do a really good job leading the trail into where it's
Yeah,
going.
it's a movie that does a lot of like seeding, planting of elements that
Mhm.
will then like ultimately have more resonance later. And even when it comes to the dancing, it's this element that surprises you, and then you go further into the story and you realize what an integral part that it is. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of really interesting and clever writing when it comes to that aspect. It's also interesting the way that the story sort of just kind of transforms while still being cohesive. Like if it's almost like if you're not paying attention, you'd think it's an anthology, but there is a through line to it.
Interesting.
The first sequence in particular was the one that I responded to the most, and it's this big thing that's centered on mostly Chiwetel Ejiofor and Karen Gillan's characters, as like the world starts to like fall apart at its seams. And to me, like, even though Flanagan is a director who's made a lot of very scary stuff in his career, this has some of the scariest stuff, and it's not even like
It's true.
traditional horror. It's just the kind of like
Existential
existential
dread.
dread that
Okay.
really really gets under your skin. And part of maybe my more muted reaction to the film is I almost wanted more of just that first section rather than the more like personal coming of age elements that play out later. But it all is really resonant. It does have a lot of the Mike Flanagan style of like monologue writing where the camera slowly pushes in, and every word has like has ton of uh meaning and moral messaging behind it. But I did still find it really effective. Like, this is one of the films that I think elicited the most like teary responses. Like, people just really felt
Taiwan,
touched
right?
and enriched
Mhm.
by it. So I
Yeah.
while I said before I'm not sure if I see this as like a big Oscar player, it might just be one of these films that touches people enough that it could get into some of those conversations. I mean, I wouldn't be entirely surprised to see it crop up in some like adapted screenplay conversations, or even maybe Mark Hamill for supporting actor.
Mm.
But it
Ooh,
It took me a
even
while to
even
really?
realize
if
it was him, actually.
Mhm. But
Really?
even yeah, it is kind
Yeah.
of like he disappears into this character in a way. It's
Yeah,
not what
it's
you
not it's
expect
like
from
the
Mark Hamill at
final
all.
scene where yeah, like, it takes it they really had to close in on his face for a second to be like, "Oh my god, that's Mark Hamill." Okay.
How about my boy Jacob Tremblay?
He's really good. He's in it the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, of all the
Okay.
major names, he probably has the smallest part. It's funny because there's an actor who plays a younger version of him, and I could have sworn that was just Jacob
It
Tremblay.
looks
They
like a
filmed it
younger
5
version
years
of
ago.
yeah, and he
All right,
he
sounds good.
talks in the same way, you know how Jacob Tremblay in interviews is very, like, mature and sounding like a 50-year-old man sometimes that's, like, a well-read 60-year-old in a study is kinda how Jacob Tremblay talks. That's how the younger kid talked
Mhm.
too, and I was like, "What the hell?" In a
Interesting.
good
Okay.
way. You're a little genius, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. It's the year for
Yeah, so
existential dread. TV Glow.
I
Tell me this.
But the way that this does it, it does it in a way that it starts there and it kind of brings you through it, and it does kind of leave you off with a little bit of it, but it's still trying to leave you off with like hope and a positive
yeah,
emotion,
it's
which
certainly a
I
lot
like kind of the
more.
inverted structure.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
certainly a much more optimistic, hopeful film than TV Glow, even if it has some of that like internal dilemma to it as well.
Mhm.
So an interesting film to have taken that top prize, and I think a bit of a surprise to some people. Although, like, if you just sort of took the temperature on the ground, it was definitely going to be in the running. People really, really responded to this film. Um,
I thought it was gonna win. I was like, I'm pretty sure based on what I'm hearing, because a lot of people were like Emilia, and I'm like, well, Emilia has the most screenings, but
yeah,
despite it, which is probably fine. I haven't seen it. I don't know. I'm like, I think Life of Chuck is taking it,
yeah.
but
So
and
Amelia
Anora
Perez,
got
as you
third.
mentioned,
Yeah,
as you mentioned, Amelia Perez came in second. It ended up now winning prizes at both Cannes and TIFF. And while there are a lot of
Damn.
people who came out of the film really, really loving it, this is definitely one of the films that's has a bit of a divisive reaction. Like, there's a bunch of people who are not responding to this film at all. Neither Amanda or I got a chance to catch it, so
I skipped it 3
we're
times.
I'm waiting for New York, but I think Chase caught it, so maybe we'll hear a little bit
He
from
did.
him later in the week on his thoughts on it. Amanda, you did get to catch the film that ended up in third place,
I
Anora.
did. I did. I love it. That's the one. That's the one. I went in with the most hype. I paid so much money for a secondhand ticket to make sure I was confirmed screening so I didn't miss Megalopolis. Fuck me. But Anora didn't disappoint. I spent 180 Canadian dollars on that ticket and I don't regret a cent. To be fair, they upped all the premium prices this year, so the tickets automatically were $90 to $95 for those first screenings. So
Ew.
I only played twice as much, but it was worth it. It was
And it was still
actually
through Ticketmaster?
no. This was I
Yeah,
bought this before. Yeah, it was still through Ticketmaster, but I bought this before it went into the resale stage on Ticketmaster. I bought it. There's like a
Gotcha.
subreddit called TIFF tickets, so I was wheeling and dealing over there. Most people were fine. Most people were like, I felt bad. Some people were trying to make a little bit of money. And then one guy definitely realized who I was and was trying to like undervalue the Megalopolis ticket. And I was like, no, 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 I'm gonna give you like the solid $100 to fully cover what you paid for the ticket, man. It's all good. So yeah, I paid
What a Canadian
$100.
negotiator.
I know, right? He kept
No,
dropping
here's
it.
the sales tax.
Yeah, he wanted like 130 and then he kept dropping it and he's like, honestly, I'd take 85. And I was like, no, stop. Here's money. Thank you. But Anora, 180 bucks, full, no regrets. It is so
139
fun.
minutes.
It is
Wow.
non-stop and it doesn't feel it. That's what
Okay.
I mean. It's a nice and it kind of has two. I know Chase says he likes the first half more. I appreciate both kind of parts of this because it's got the first half where you're building up and it's all fun and exciting. I had no idea what this movie was about when I went into it. I just knew it was getting good
Mhm.
reviews at Con and I'm like, I don't need to know anything else. I'm gonna go. Um, and it's so good and it does this really like fun, genuine, chaotic thing where when people are having conversations and they're mad at each other, you're going to start yelling over one another. Like people don't pause and wait for someone to finish a long drawn out thought, so they're immediately coming in at each other and talking over each other. And like if there's two people you're trying to talk to, like she'll be talking to one of them and some other dude's trying to talk to the guy on the other side, and it feels very authentic
Uncut
and
Gems?
chaotic, and it's a little bit in a really good way. But then on top of that, like some of the people are speaking Russian. So, but it felt so natural. Like it wasn't distracting to be like looking at the Russian subtitles and hearing English. It really flows well in a way that isn't distracting, even though there's so much language kind of. I almost feel like maybe it's better that some of the yelling is in Russian and then some of it's in English. It's, it's really fun because I don't know how long it takes for some of them to realize that she speaks Russian. So she's just
Mm.
going back. It's so fun. That's my best movie of the
yeah.
festival. Yeah.
Sean Baker is a filmmaker that I particularly love. I mean, from Tangerine and Red Rocket and Starlit, and, the Florida Project is the one that I always slips my mind. Just a filmmaker that has, I feel like, gotten increasing renown as kind of been able to like expand his reach a little bit more, and it feels like this is kind of a culminating moment for him. That this is
Mhm.
kind of things coming together in a way
Mm.
where the Hollywood establishment is maybe, really opening up their praise for him. It feels like this could be a big player in the Oscars. Just compared to other Sean Baker films, where does Anora stand to you? Is this your new favorite from him? Is it similar
I
to any of the
think
other
so.
films he's worked on?
I think so. I think it's my favorite. I'd probably have to rewatch a couple, but for me
Hmm.
so far, it was such a standout. Like for me, it was an instant 4.5. And
Sure.
maybe,
Okay.
down for me at least, down the line, you never know. I'll watch it again. Maybe it'll go down to a 4, maybe it'll stay where it is, or maybe it'll go to a 5 because it's
Mm.
really tight and it's just really the way he's playing with like sexuality and sex in this character in a way that is so easy to overdo or just be used in ways that isn't effective. With this, it does really feel like it's used very effectively in a way for her to kind of like maintain control over situations, and then that makes way for more vulnerable moments down the line that are like so effective in a way that like you don't usually see with male directors. Like, not to be rude, but usually you get that a little bit more with like female directors that kind of get that perspective a little bit more. So it's interesting to see him go from something like Red Rocket into this and it be so kind of very effective and how they did it. So yeah, big fan of it. Big fan of this one.
Where do you have the girl,
Yeah,
Mikey Madison?
yeah. A
In
lot of people
performances of
have
the year
her
so
as a
far.
front runner for Best
Yeah,
Actress.
tell us.
Yeah. She really commits. Like, she's got the full like screw you, I'm not a whore, like full accent going, and it's all like, you tell him we're in love, and it's just like really committed, but it like sounds good, like it works.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, she's really good, and it's nonstop. Like, she's in every shot of the movie and she's almost always saying something. So
Mhm.
it was a lot for her, and she does a really good job. Like, I've never disliked her. You know, she always stands out in what she's
Mhm.
in,
Solid.
but she hasn't really been in anything I've seen, at least like a great enough degree to really say like I really like this actress, you
Yeah.
know. And this is, I'm like, okay, she can do a lot, she has range. And she was like very soft spoken in the Q&A afterwards. So I'm like, so it almost feels like she is working really hard to like get that persona up on screen. I'm sure, you know, in a Q&A, it's a little bit different than when she's hanging out with friends and stuff. But like,
Mhm.
you know, we've gone to Q&As and
It
sometimes
is a
people talk and it's like,
transformation.
you're exactly the way you are in everything. This felt
Yeah,
like, oh, you're putting in a lot of work here.
totally.
Yeah.
It's really good.
I'm excited. I
Yeah.
know Anora is slated to come out in October. Hopefully, it gets a wide
Mhm.
release for everybody because
I hope.
this is Neon, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Neon snatched it.
Uh,
The
so that's going to
Kings.
be one that's on the horizon right there. I am extremely excited for it. Sounds
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that this is only the second time that a Palme d'Or winner has placed at the TIFF's People's Choice Award. And the first time that happened, it was Parasite, which
Parasite.
obviously went on to win Best
Sheesh.
Picture. So that
Damn.
might be a good sign for Anora's potential Oscar chances as well. I have my screening of that a week from today. I cannot wait.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I think the movie that people were maybe most surprised to see not end up in the top 3 for People's Choice was the next film from Jason Reitman,
Mm.
Saturday Night. This one, as we've talked about previously on Intercut, is the story behind the moments leading up to the premiere of the first episode of Saturday Night Live. This is a story told essentially in
Nice.
real time leading up to that 11:30 October 11th, 1975 premiere. It has a really excellent
Oh, really?
ensemble of
Yeah.
actors. Yeah.
It's
It's
literally
a
the 90
really
minutes going into it.
Well, I mean,
and the
that's why I'm excited for it, but that's why they're releasing it for October.
October 11th for the
Damn.
50-year
Okay, that's
anniversary or
cool.
Mhm.
All right.
49-year anniversary, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's got a really excellent collection of young actors. Gabriella Bell
Stack.
is playing young Lorne Michaels. Cooper Hoffman
He's
is
really good.
playing a young Dick Ebersol. You have Dylan O'Brien doing a pretty uncanny Dan Aykroyd impression. To me, the standout
He's like
amongst
handsome
them,
Dan.
yeah, the standout amongst them was Corey Michael Smith, who you might recognize from May December, doing an uncanny Chevy Chase. Like, it is a really spot on Chevy Chase. And
It took me
maybe
a
some.
minute. It took a
Mhm.
minute to be like, "Oh, you guys didn't, that's not actually just stock footage of archive footage of Chevy Chase.
Yeah,
That's a
it
person. Okay. Oh shit."
it's pretty incredibly
Yeah.
well done. Um, and the movie has this real kinetic energy. Like, there's a fun chaos to it in the ways that I was really hoping for, as you know, as they struggle to sort of figure out how this is all going to come together and whether or not they'll make it in time with competing interests and all these personalities to wrangle. Um, it it has this sort of momentum to it and energy that I think makes it really fun. The cast is really having a great time with it. It's a very funny movie. There's certain elements to it where I don't know if the story feels like a full story, and in many ways it's intentionally not, because this is the thing that led up to the start of SNL. It's not the arc of SNL, right?
Yeah.
So there's some ways in which I'm not sure how good of a movie this is, but it is a movie that I really enjoyed and had a great time watching and am eager to see again. So I had fun with it. Amanda, I know you also really enjoyed Saturday Night.
Yeah, I did really have a lot of fun with this one. I almost feel like, just to kind of speaking to the idea that it doesn't necessarily feel like a full movie in some ways, it almost feels like the perfect pilot episode. Like,
Right.
you'd
Interesting.
go into a series after this of kind of like the continued, build up of how you get there. It does still work
Mhm.
as they make sure there's an arc. They make sure that you're going through it, and then there's like the moment where it might not happen. Somebody having like the come to Jesus talk with Lauren, being like, you
Mhm.
have to be realistic here as to why this is happening, and if you bomb this, like, that's it. But it's really fun, really strong. They do give it's so chaotic that you just have people kind of like working out different skits in the halls at all time, because at this point he
Mhm.
still thinks he can fit in like literally 60 different things into this 90 minutes, until they kind of really curate it down to what you end up getting. I know some people said that if you have no love for that original SNL cast, like, you wouldn't care about this, but I've never seen an entire episode of SNL in my life, so I certainly haven't seen any SNL from the
Mhm.
opening days when it was just called Saturday Night. And I liked it a lot. Like, yeah, there were some
Mhm.
skits that like they're laughing there, and I'm like, see, I wouldn't laugh at that now, but I guess back then maybe
Yeah.
you would laugh at that, and it would make sense that that's funny. And I think that might be the only area where it's a little bit weaker, and that like when they're not doing the skits, it's funnier than a lot of the
When
skits.
they're
I think
doing
there's
this, that's
one
funny.
joke, the guy he picks up from the bar, I can't remember his name. He writes the Chevy Chase character a joke, and that was funny as hell. But outside that, I'm like, okay, everything outside the actual show is funnier than the show that we're supposed to believe
Mm.
was so good that it was undeniable. But that's just comedy changing over the eras in sketch and skit comedy just changing. But I feel like that's probably going to be the bigger complaint that some people have. But it's just a fun movie, and it feels breezy.
Mhm. And
I'm excited.
there's some stuff in there too with how they end up using the true to life elements that I think if you're, maybe if you're not necessarily like an SNL historian, they'll be interesting and they'll be, they'll remind you of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot that's kind of apocryphal, and just the way that they kind of push everything into this condensed timeline. There, there's a lot of stuff that definitely feels heightened specifically for the movie. I know there's people who have some issues with the portrayal of Jim Belushi and the portrayal of Jim Henson in this
Why?
movie, but I think it's even if it's not necessarily like a historically accurate document, there's something that's sort of spiritually true to it and to the nature of SNL. So like I don't know if this is, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of people who point out all the historical inaccuracies, and ultimately I don't think they matter that much because I think the movie does a good job of evoking the feeling that we get from an iconic show like
Mm,
SNL and like what SNL represents to a lot of people.
yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I would say with the Jim Henson thing is probably just kind of making him like a hippy dippy butt of the joke a little bit. But as far as I'm aware, that might have been accurate. I don't know. So
Also, what was the answer to that? Because remember he got double billed with Kaufman.
yeah,
What happened?
Yeah, they
he's just
they
playing both
just have him
characters.
playing two roles. There's no greater reason for it. He's just
Yeah,
Nick Braun is just playing both Jim Henson and Andy
and
Kaufman
Andy
for some
Kaufman.
And it
reason.
And the
works.
points, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so for some people were literally like, "Was that Andy Kaufman making a joke, pretending to be Jim Henson?" And I was like, "No, that was they. He was just playing
Mhm.
two people."
Are
Yeah,
they
it's
ever
the
in the
kind of
same
thing.
room at the same time?
No,
No,
so maybe it's the kind of thing where if you weren't familiar with
What?
Nick Braun as an actor, you might not even notice it.
yeah,
But
Interesting. Okay.
because
we
one of them
are,
has
so
like a
we
big
do.
accent, and one of them just kind of has like the hippy dippy, more Nick Braun. He's more
Gotcha.
noticeable. I don't know. I noticed, but I could see some people
Mm.
maybe not.
Mhm.
So not up there with 30 Rock, but still an interesting take on.
I would say that it probably lands like smack dab in the middle. If you just kind of like condensed all of 30 Rock into one amorphous thing, it's probably on par with it. But I would say it's better than it's better than when 30 Rock's at its weakest. And I don't think it's that far off of 30 Rock at its best necessarily. Like, I thought it was pretty.
Ooh, Zach's a shooter for 30 Rock. You gotta be careful
Yeah,
there.
I
I love
love
no,
30
and
Rock.
I do
I'd
love
say
30 Rock,
yeah.
but
To me, it lands somewhere between 30 Rock and Studio 60. And I say that as somebody who
Interesting.
doesn't hate
Okay.
Studio 60, because it does have a
Mhm.
little bit more of the like taking itself seriously and the weightiness around the importance of making this happen. You know, there's also an interesting thing in that they cast a lot of these actors younger than their real life counterparts were at this time. And I think it's done sort of to
Really? Oh, wow.
emphasize that this is like it's not just about the show, but about a new generation taking over television. And that aspect of it is really interesting too. We got a
Yes,
couple
it's sick, bro.
questions in the live stream. Ace Zach Reviews asked, how was Rachel Sennett? Feel like I hear nothing about her in it. It's not it's not the splashiest role particularly. I think that's partially why you're not necessarily hearing much about her in it. She
I
is
liked her in it. But.
yeah, she's good in it, and it's also cool because it's not necessarily the typical Rachel Sennett part. She's a bit more soft spoken and kinder than I think her characters normally get portrayed as. She plays, I forget the
Got you right here.
person's
Rosie
name.
Schuster.
Rosie Schuster.
Rosie Schuster, who is Lorne Michaels' wife. And
Technically,
Wow.
it's one of those things. Technically, Lorne Michaels' wife.
or at least was at the time.
Yeah, it was at the time, but even then, it was a little bit weird. I think Caitlin actually said it best in that like Rachel has this undeniable Gen Z quality
Mhm.
that always comes through in some of her line delivery. So she probably feels the
Damn.
least authentic to the time, but it's still good. They let her have this nice running bit where she's kind of like gaffing at people as she's walking through, and that was really fun. So she does a lot. She's
Mhm.
kind of like an emotional ringer in the movie for Lauren's
She is
character.
Yeah, she's also like a bit of a counterbalance in that there's a lot of like cynicism and negativity flowing around the building, and she's the opposite in a lot of ways. So
Okay.
it's an
Yeah.
interesting part, even if it's not like one of the 5 or 6 most interesting
Yeah.
in the movie.
She was
Her press has
second
been
build
funny.
in the movie. She's second build in the movie. Right,
Yeah,
right
oddly.
underneath Gabriel. Is it
And
because
she
is
is a
she the
rising
second
star.
person that appears on screen though? Is she the second person that appears on screen?
Yeah. I mean, Letterboxd got her on the
so
first line here.
That's
so.
the other weird thing, because they say that the cast or the credits are in order of appearance, but they are absolutely not in order of
No.
appearance. Maybe they still need to move around a little bit, but
Oh yeah.
oddly enough, Saturday Night was not the only film that played at Toronto that was a real-time recreation of an iconic episode of television. The other one was The Luckiest Man in America, which premiered on opening night of the festival. This one was one I was looking forward to a lot as a game show channel addicted kid who watched a lot of Press Your Luck. This is a recreation of a really interesting story of this one man who figured out the system behind this game show and was able to win exponentially more than most people do. I think the record before he appeared on the show was $23,000, and he took home over $100,000.
I thought they said he beat the record when he hit 15. I thought when he hit 15,000, they were like, "That's the record."
I thought
like
I thought it
15 or
was
16 or
20, but
something.
I could be wrong. You saw it more
Is that
recently
Emery
than I
Cohen?
did.
Emery Cohen?
Emery Cohen's not in this one. No, that is Paul Walter Hauser. Oh yeah, right.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Competing for the role. Paul Walter Hauser, in his sort of Paul Walter Hauser bag is kind of the like shifty, kind of untrustworthy outsider guy who maybe has a little bit more going on the surface than you might think, based on how he presents himself. But here it's sort of telling the story from the moment he like appears on the game show to them realizing what's going on and trying to put a stop to what's happening. And ultimately, I think a lot of the fun is not had in the Paul Walter Hauser side of things, but on the side of David Strathairn and Shamir Anderson, who play executives working on the game show, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and figuring out how to stop it within the allotted time that they have to film an episode. It's a pretty interesting, recreation of this time period and of this era. I feel like ultimately, though, what lets the movie down is that it just doesn't have much to say about this era. Like, it's effective, and I think there's something tantalizing into seeing the little guy win one over on the system, but it doesn't take it very anywhere really that interesting. And by the end, you're left wanting a little bit for some other there to be there. It just sort of ends at a point. And while while I was compelled with it while I watched it, there just wasn't a lot to think about once credits rolled.
Yeah, they teased some stuff kind of midway through, and I wanted them to go deeper on it, and they just never
Right.
do. To the point that I'm like, I think this guy actually sucked a lot, guys. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like, I don't
They
know,
got to sell
man.
it.
But yeah, they got to sell it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't bad. It was I
Would
call it a
you
good. It's a good palate cleanse movie.
would you recommend what we saw last year, and it's going to come out to Netflix in a couple of weeks? Anna Kendrick's Woman of the Hour
Oh, of
instead.
course, that's so much better. They're
Okay.
totally
Yeah.
different though. This is way
My
more of a
my
comedy.
Okay.
But,
my reaction when I was leaving the theater, I think I told this to Caitlin, was it's like if Woman of the Hour wasn't about anything.
Yeah.
Which
Damn.
sounds a
Kind
bit
of the vibe you
harsher
get.
than I mean, because I
Sheesh.
still enjoyed The
Oh
Luckiest
my
Man in
God.
America, but it just, like, this is a movie that's begging for some kind of like epilogue or a title card at the end to tell you what
Yeah.
happened to all these people. Like, the director got on stage for the Q&A after the movie and said, somebody asked him what happened to the real life Michael Larson, and he said, yeah, eventually he ended up on the run from the FBI in Florida, where he died. It's like, put
Where's that
that
movie?
in your movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember that poster you
Very
ripped at
weird.
South by for that? Like, is it like that? Or-
Dickweed.
Dickweed, where you were like, why did we even cover this if like
Not-
the guy
didn't
wasn't?
make
No, it's not that
It didn't
bad.
make me angry. It's still an interesting story. It's just, it's sort of like, what's your point? Like, it's
Mhm.
waiting for some kind of
They introduce
extra.
all these interesting ideas in terms of like how you can market something like this. The one person in the room realizing, like, guys, this isn't a bad thing. We can actually really use this to our advantage. And you're kind of expecting them to go down that avenue, and then it doesn't happen. And they don't even touch on like this change the landscape of games for this XYZ reason. They try to end it on some weird sentimentality thing. Which is really
Okay.
weird when you find out all the stuff that built into it and why this person is kind of in the
Yeah.
position that he's in. So, and the fact that he ended up on the run from the FBI is not surprising from the stuff that they trickled out, but that seemed like the more interesting aspect of the story than this guy figuring out that there was only 5 patterns on the game show.
Yeah. This movie did lead to one of my more interesting in theater experiences, where I sat down for this movie and they were a little late to let people into the theater to see Luckiest Man in America. So basically the whole row in front of me was empty by the time that the lights turned off. So as the movie's just beginning, these 2 women come in and sit in front of me, and then these 2 guys follow them and they sit right in front of me, and the women are on their phones the entire time, and then these 2
Damn.
guys are just whispering to each other, and it's really annoying. And the one guy keeps pointing at the screen when Paul Walter Hauser's on and goes, "That guy's got great calves." And it's a little bit like I'm getting ready to lean in and tell them to shut the fuck up so I can enjoy the movie. And then the opening title credits happen and the actors' names start appearing on screen. Johnny Knoxville's name comes up, and the 2 women and one of the guys start clapping. The other guy starts booing, and I realize, oh, the guy booing is Johnny Knoxville. I'm sitting directly behind Johnny Knoxville watching the premiere of Luckiest Man in
Damn.
America. So I didn't tell him to shut up, although I did think it.
Apparently he did.
You were
Were
the
you at the screening where he
unluckiest man of
left
the hour.
midway through, like before he even appeared on screen? He was gone.
Yeah, he just bailed on the movie about halfway through before he had ever appeared on screen. So I expected him to
funny.
show up for the Q&A, and then he didn't do that either.
That's so
That's pretty
funny.
Knoxville of him.
Very.
I sat behind Knoxville at Luckiest Man in America. I also sat right across from Brenda Song and Macaulay Culkin at the Last Showgirl, and not too far from Jamie Lee Curtis or Pamela Anderson either. It was I felt like one of the stars for a minute there in the orchestra of Princess of Wales. Last Showgirl, I think, was one of the most hyped movies that played at Toronto. It had its world premiere. It's the new film from Gia Coppola, whose grandfather also had a film at the festival. But Gia's film is about a seasoned showgirl who's planning for her future after the show she's been in for 30 years is set to close. The aging showgirl is played by Pamela Anderson, not a name that we're used to seeing in prestige films, but the kind of actor who Borat's own, Baywatch's own Pamela Anderson. An actor whose career does lend itself to this kind of part.
For sure.
She feels, in a lot of ways, it feels like her entire career has really informed this kind of role. And I found the result to be pretty interesting. You know, it excuse me. She it feels in a way like one of these wrestler type of movies. Like I feel like we're gonna do this for every type of entertainer whose body is a commodity. But
Uh,
I think where it mostly excels is in the specificity of its vision of Las Vegas. You know, they're not just sort of like archetypes; they're very specific characters within the milieu of Las Vegas entertainers, whether that's Pamela Anderson's Showgirl. She has a friend played by Jamie Lee Curtis who's kind of a bit more loudmouthed and has found herself in increasingly odd and tough jobs. There's sort of the younger generation played by Kiernan Shipka and Brendan Song, who don't have the same kind of like starry-eyed admiration for the good old days of the showgirl entertainment. To me, one of the real standouts was Dave Bautista, who's playing a really slimmed down character. He is the like stage manager of the production, and it really leans into that like soft-spoken sweetheartness that he does bring to some parts. It's really the acting here that I think stands out more than the story itself. It is really underwritten, and it kind of doesn't really go anyplace. It just sort of finds a mode and stays there. But I still enjoyed this one. Amanda, I was. Were you also a bit mixed on this, or did you miss
I
it?
didn't catch it. I missed it. Basically, you
Right,
guys
right.
started giving it the middling reviews, so I was gonna see, I think, Harbin instead, and then I missed that too.
How's Brenda's song?
Nice. Really good, and I feel like it's interesting the career she's carved out for herself in
Yeah.
these like occasional appearances in prestige movies, but she, you know, she just sort of is a bit no nonsense, and you know, Pam Anderson's character has these really wistful recollections of a time when showgirls were treated more luxuriously, and she just her character just doesn't really have the patience for it, but she still does have this like emotional bond with Pam Anderson's character. I thought she was really effective in it.
Nice. I had heard an interview with her, and she said that she was very excited to be in something like this. And I mean, she's had
Yeah.
parts like in Social Network and stuff. So sounds good.
Yeah, I found it funny though. Just I was so struck by Macaulay Culkin amongst all of them, just sitting in the audience watching her.
That's right. Married.
Yeah, yeah.
They got the baby.
Married.
All right, sounds good. And
Yeah.
Pamela Anderson also has that they're reevaluating. I think it's for Hulu, Baywatch. So with that having its resurgence of looking back at it, that doc from earlier, I
Mhm.
think maybe this year, right?
Yeah,
Or last year, and then this.
I think we
it's-
watched
you're
that when
right.
we were in Sundance.
Yep. So
Yeah.
sounds good.
I want to talk about a pair of movies that are about famous singers who are portrayed as non-humans. First, I want to say talk about Piece by Piece, which is the Lego Pharrell bio documentary
Yes.
from Morgan Neville. Morgan
course.
Neville, who's done a bunch of interesting films, from Won't You Be My Neighbor to 20 Feet from Stardom, as well as Best of Enemies and Roadrunner. Probably one of our foremost documentarians, particularly when it comes to profiles of famous people. And I admittedly went into Piece by Piece really cynically because like just the idea of doing this whole story, but it's Legos, just sort of feels a bit like a bit like they're trying to dangle keys in front of you. Like, won't you come to this documentary if we fill it full of your favorite toys? You child,
a
you
doc?
little baby. Yeah, it's a documentary.
Keep going. What?
But
Did you not
and
know
so
that?
it's got
I thought it was like a
Like a-
recreate like a biopic in Lego form.
No, it's a documentary, even with like traditional talking heads. Like the documentary is cut around all these interviews with famous celebrities and will cut to their talking heads, except it's just
They're
just
Legos.
Lego talking heads. Even Morgan Neville appears as a Lego during the interviews of this documentary. And I think I read somewhere that they didn't tell Jay-Z or a couple other people that the movie would be Legos. They just filmed it like a normal documentary.
Stop. That's funny. Okay, that's good.
And like I said, I went into it with a lot of cynicism because like I feel like the story should be able to stand on its own, but ultimately they did do a lot of really interesting things with the Legos in order to visualize some of these things. Pharrell has famously talked about how he has synesthesia, which is the like you see sounds as colors, I believe is what
Really?
people describe it as. Yeah. So like they play around with that and how they make
My friend has
when
that.
he makes
That's crazy.
yeah um he makes these beats and the beats become these little like Lego assembly blocks that sort of bounce to the beat and stuff like that, and it just ends up visualizing a medium that is not always that visual, which I think is effective, particularly at communicating the story potentially to a younger audience. Ultimately, though, there's just like enough visual inventiveness and creativity that I enjoyed it. You know, there's like this moment where they go to meet with Snoop Dogg and the room is full of weed smoke, but because it's a PG movie, somebody does a lot of PG spray and then the room gets hazy. You know, they'll talk about a moment where Jay-Z was busy filming a music video, and they won't say what the music video is for, but you see him on a yacht and it's like, oh, that's the H to the Izzo video, you know? Like it's full of those little like creative references and things that are like, you know, instantly recognizable to people who grew up with this music, that I just found it to be pretty enjoyable. I liked it a lot more than I expected to. It's a solid, you know, not going to blow you away. It's still like a pretty typical music documentary, but I I really connected with it. So I'd probably even like a 3.5 star on this one. I liked it more than I expected.
Damn.
Yeah.
That one will be out October 11th as well. So
Yeah,
well,
don't have to wait.
a better
too
way to
long for
cement your
that,
story than for the kids and Legos.
right?
Mhm.
That was good. And he does not have his partner in this. He didn't have his buddy from the Neptunes in
Oh,
this.
so that was the other thing I was confused by. Chad
Uh,
Hugo is like a significant part of this documentary. He might even be the person with the second most spoken lines in this thing. And apparently they're not on speaking terms. I don't know how that works, but he certainly didn't pretend like Chad wasn't a part of his success.
okay,
Chad
good.
gets a lot of credit in this movie.
Oh, bro, that was yeah, all right. You got me back in then. All right, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I was a little worried with that. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Okay.
other sort of untraditional approach to profiling a famous musician was in Better Man. This is the new film from Michael Gracie, who did The Greatest Showman and has done a lot of work in music videos and music documentaries. And this film is a biopic, not a documentary, a biopic about the UK pop star Robbie Williams, except they make a really strange but ultimately successful, I think, choice to portray Robbie Williams as a CGI monkey. He basically looks like he's in Planet of the Apes, but everybody else is a normal human in this film. And the idea comes from this thing that Robbie Williams used to say in interviews where he says he feels like a performing monkey. Not really a big part of what this film ultimately is. I think one of the things that made it interesting, though, is because there's only like a minimal physical resemblance between CGI monkey Robbie Williams and the real Robbie Williams, is that you kind of ignore the thing that happens in a lot of these music biopics where you look at the actor and you're like, that doesn't quite look like Amy Winehouse, or that's not how I picture Elton John or Freddie Mercury or whatever. That sort of just goes out of the window, and you start to think a little bit more about the person, the personality, the character. And this is a rare film about a famous person that is just unafraid to portray him as an unrepentant asshole. He is like so nasty and vile to the people in his lives, and just kind of makes a fool out of himself for so much of this film that I found a lot of it to be pretty frank and compelling. It got me into the story, and Robbie Williams is not a singer that I have much of a connection to at all, but it made me want to look up some of his songs afterwards. Michael Gracie, obviously, yeah, I got some additions for my TIFF playlist.
Let's go.
Michael Gracie obviously has a lot of experience in the kind of music video realm and filming musical performances, and there are just some sequences here that are showstoppers. There's one early in the film where Robbie Williams and his early boy band take to the streets of London, and it is so incredible that it prompted a mid-movie applause break at my TIFF screening. Like, it's just really incredible. John Chu, eat your heart out. It's so good.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so we got a question from Josh here asking, how is Robbie's acting? They had somebody else portray Robbie Williams and do the whole CGI suit. So Robbie's not actually in the movie at all.
Not even as the voice?
not even as the voice. I mean, I think maybe for the performances it's his voice, but not like newly recorded.
Yeah. Fascinating.
But I would recommend it. I believe this one is
Sounds
supposed to come out around Christmas.
Oh wow. Okay.
Just a couple more movies that are sort of around the sphere of entertainment. Didn't catch a lot of documentaries at TIFF, but I did catch Vice is Broke, which is the new film from Eddie Wong, sort of recounting the rise and fall of the Vice media empire. Eddie Wong, of course, hosted Wong's World for many years on Vice, became known to a lot of people through his work for Vice, and has since filed lawsuit against Vice for unpaid royalties from those shows. What I found really compelling about Vice is Broke is that it is kind of a Vice style documentary about Vice, and it does the things that Vice documentaries does well, but it also has similar shortcomings. You know, it's full of personality. The voice is really strong. There's a lot of style, and they are unafraid to kind of do some, you know, more fun, silly things in order to get the story across. There's just that energy, that pace that you get to a lot of those Vice documentaries that's really present in this one too. But all of that does come at a sacrifice to diving deeper on a lot of these subjects. Like there's a moment where Eddie talks about, oh, we got the actual bankruptcy papers that they filed. We're not going to talk about what's in them, but we got them. And I think there's certain points where I wanted them to dive a little deeper into certain areas, but I still found it to be a really compelling take on what happened. It's also really interesting because this documentary essentially happened because of that lawsuit that Eddie Wong filed. He, in exchange for those unpaid royalties, instead of getting those, he was able to get access to all of his shows and get out of his NDA. So he's able to use that footage in order to put this documentary together. So it's a bet on himself in a lot of ways. And I found that aspect of it compelling, even if there's other aspects of it that were maybe a little bit lacking. I know Amanda found the next film very lacking, though, even though it's one of the most anticipated out of TIFF. I need to hear a little bit about your thoughts on Megalopolis.
I don't know if you guys have me on Letterboxd. You saw I said I don't know if I enjoyed a collective minute of this movie. I am happy to see that it has gone down 0.1 stars. I have the spoiler tag because I mentioned the fourth wall break. So that's the only thing, if you know, but that's the only thing that's in there. And I basically said that I haven't felt that trapped in a movie theater since watching Cats. And I believe that. This is
that good?
Theater experience. And I feel like it's going to be the same kind of thing, that if you go watching it for sincerity or anything, or even trying to expect it to be so bad it's good, you're going to have a miserable time. But if you at some point find a way to only watch yourself with friends so you can actually scream at the screen when things are happening and being confused, then it might be fun. But having to sit there all around the fancy dressed people at the Roy Thompson Theater, and apparently even at the Scotiabank Theater where Chase saw it, you're going to lose it. I almost walked out so many times. Even the Substance bandana is upset. It's upset. It's upset.
What?
The Substance headband. Pump it up.
Pump it up.
Pump it up.
That's raw. That's cool.
I know, with Sue. Pump it up with Sue. But it is a miserable experience. I've seen so many people say things like, it's like if you gave Tommy Wiseau $120 million or Neil Breen $120 million, but it doesn't even have the charm that either of those people can bring to something, the sincerity of what they bring when they're making their schlock. This is the vanity project of an 80-something-year-old man who genuinely thought he was doing something, and he was both making this commentary on the state of entertainment, the progression of entertainment through the years, the state of the world, the state of America. And then it's just so dumb. It's like every type of Shakespearean play put together. So you've got your comedy, you've got your tragedy, but they all pop up at weird times. Certain characters seem to represent certain arcs. So there's no tonal consistency amongst the plot, amongst the characters, amongst the story. Sometimes Adam Driver character feels like Neo. It's just weird. It's just weird. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. It ruined. This is the reason I saw less than 30 movies. There's so many times I'd wake up in the morning. I'm like, well, I'm certainly not going anywhere now.
Yeah.
I'm going for alcohol.
It takes a spot of 5.
It's just.
Sheesh.
It did.
Is he
like it was bad. I didn't even stay for the Q&A. They were all there and I left. I was gone before the lights came on.
You can get to see Francis?
I didn't. Oh, I saw he came out and introduced, but I have no respect for that man.
Hey,
I didn't stay for
you got
Adam.
to see it.
I didn't stay for Adam.
Gotcha.
You know, I didn't stay. I think Aubrey Plaza bailed, even though she was originally on the list. So I think that's more to do with Marvel. I think she's doing Agatha promotion.
Agatha, yeah.
There's a lot of people like Vanessa Kirby was like flown in and gone within 4 hours for Eden. She wasn't even there for the Q&A. She was there for the red carpet and then she was gone. Like they're tight turnaround. Pedro wasn't there for Wild Robot. But yeah, no, I was gone. I couldn't. Megalopolis is a very annoying thing because the more I talk about it, the more people are like, well, I got to see it now. I'm like, no, it's not that kind of spectacle. Yeah. It is not the kind of spectacle that is like, again, for one, I don't want you to waste your money on this shit. This man spent so much money on this. He deserves to have a little bit of a dressing down. Like, don't fund him. Don't give him money. There's a reason why no one else wanted to give him money to make this because it is not good. This isn't like the savior of cinema. I'm sure some people are actually going to like it, but I think it's funny when you look at a lot of the high reviews, no one in those high star reviews, or very few of them, are saying anything about actually enjoying the movie. It's all just like enjoying the progression of like cinema and respecting what it's going for. But I'm like, we're not supposed to give out accolades for trying, I guess. We're not supposed to be like, but he did his best. Like, I'm sorry. We don't need to do that for a man who's already had his accolades. We can just say, I'm sorry, this is bad.
Yeah, and he feels like an anti-participation trophy type of guy anyway.
That's what I mean. So like, why? So they know it. So they're even trying to market on the fact that people don't like it a lot of the time. And they're giving away free tickets to it. And I'm like, it's still not worth it. Even for free tickets, they should be paying you to watch this movie. That's how bad this is. They should be giving you money to have to sit through it and then try to sit down after and make a really coherent, like, fuck, there's like one of the America's Got Talent kids descends from the ceiling at one point, and it's just a fever dream of trash. Like, my other friend started having a panic attack and had to leave before the movie was even done. It's not good.
It's no IMAX?
No, that's actually Chase said that Chase was seeing it in IMAX and said that was probably half the reason he had to walk out. It also, I think there's one scene that looks good. I actually think most of the movie looks like shit. So his whole thing of like, I had to wait until technology was far enough along. Like, this looks on par with some of the early George Lucas stuff.
You should have waited.
Should have. And I'm like, I don't know where I actually just don't know where the $120 million budget went. Like, I don't know. His pocket. Well, it's his money. It's his money.
You just put it from one account to the other.
Yeah, it's true. Big cast. It is a huge cast with a lot of people that probably would have cost.
I don't know. It's the weird thing where, like, no matter what you say about it, like from all the praise that I've seen to all the negativity I've seen, it just kind of makes you more interested in it. And like, I get it. At this point, I'm pretty confident I'm not going to enjoy this thing, but I still do want to see it.
A film festival is the
David.
Yeah. But David's one of the ones who I don't think enjoyed it. Karsten says that he doesn't. I think Karsten's review says something about thinking he blacked out for 10 minutes. And I'm like, it's the same. I know exactly what scene he's talking about. That is also where I felt like I was going to start blacking out. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think anybody actually enjoyed this. Even you said Bill Jabiri liked it. He gave it 3 stars. I don't consider that liking it. You know, like, I don't think it's good.
I'm fascinated. I can't wait to waste 138 minutes.
The only way I can recommend watching this movie is at home, or if you're at a film festival, because then it's like an experience.
That makes sense.
Or if you think they're going to do it the right way. I just can't imagine paying money and going and sitting down in a general audience and watching this. It was so miserable. And they all have like his name's Caesar Catalina. There's like Crastus, Claudio, Claudine, Claudette, and Claudie something. That are all siblings that are mildly incest. It's fucking weird, guys. It's not good.
Interesting. Well, it comes out October or
has
September.
A rat tail. Like, I don't.
Are you doing the September 23rd screenings that are going around?
That's the bit. It'll be out September 27th. There's early screenings on Monday, specifically in IMAX. They're counting as the press ones. That's when you know it's bad. when they
Yeah.
can't sell the tickets to both screenings for the IMAXs here, that they're just the press, please. We had to buy out the rows for someone to fill it in. So I still
Yeah,
got to reach out
that's funny.
because,
Oh, here's the thing, this was the only movie that did not have a press screening at the
and that's
festival.
crazy to hear.
They literally said, if you're gonna shit on our movie, you're paying for the pleasure to
For it.
do it.
Damn.
I
It had
can't remember a
2,000
movie
screenings.
doing that before at TIFF. Like it really is like
Apparently, it's
a
not
complete like
unprecedented, but it's rare.
Yeah.
it's
Zach's got a
definitely
crazy
rare.
story coming up for another one that I'm very curious for him to talk about too. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's never really a good sign.
Let's talk about a trio of movies that are about combat sports before we move on to some of the midnighters, because that was another one of the recurring motifs here. There was on opening night we saw the new film from Sean Ellis, The Cut. This one stars Orlando Bloom as a retired boxer who is coming out of retirement in order to get one last shot at the title. Only thing is he's got to drop like 32 pounds
30,
in
yeah,
6
it's like insane.
days. I'm not sure. Is that even physically possible?
Well,
Especially
when
at
you do
that.
some of the stuff they did in this movie.
Yikes!
Yeah. Just see
Yikes!
Katy Perry at home.
Like so, it's a boxing movie, but it's not really a boxing movie because it almost entirely takes place outside of the ring. It is a training movie. It is an endurance movie, and in
Got
a
it.
lot of ways,
Cutting.
it
Okay.
feels more akin to a movie like Whiplash than it does to Raging Bull or anything like that. It is about this like push for greatness or whatever you want to call it. And it is like kind of torturous to watch in some ways because like there's a lot of vomit, there is a lot of like fading in and out of consciousness because you're covered head to toe in towels to sweat it all out. It is an endurance test in a lot of ways, but it is pretty effective. Amanda, what was your takeaway from The Cut?
I thought it was a really great performance from Orlando. I like that the title kind of has a double meaning. They did some things that I think my thing is that like they joke about doing an enema and he decides not to. I'm surprised they didn't actually start showing an enema based on some of the stuff that they did to get weight off of these people. Like it was insane. I'd never like there was literally a way that they started making him lose weight that I never would have considered in my wildest dreams. Like never,
Yeah.
never. I think that the movie maybe loses a little bit when it starts showing kind of like his past a little bit more and what built into some of the trauma that he has in later life and why he blew his first chance at the title before he went through the retirement. But I think it's a really effective showing that like, you know, a lot of men do go through their own different issues with eating disorders and stuff, especially if they're competing at such a high level. And especially if they do have to do something like make a weight class and all the different ways that the kind of like the obsessive behavior, the obvious stuff, like you eat something and immediately puke it out, you start chewing on something and then you start spitting it out. And even though you didn't consume any of it, you're still hunched over trying to puke up anything that might have even dripped down your throat. So it gets really, really intense. And there's like a whole scene where I'm like, I don't even know if that happened. I think it did, but they're not going to address it. But it's good. And I like the way they handle the ending a lot, like not to spoil it, but they make a choice of framing something at the end without fully showing the glory of a moment, I guess. And I thought that that was the correct choice leading into the conclusion and where it leaves off the character. I thought it was really effective. It does kind of just end up as kind of like a bit more of a middling movie. It's one of those like it's almost great. You're going to notice some things that might make you, you know, feel like, oh, I'm noticing some Whiplash aspects to this, but it never hits that level of greatness that Whiplash does. But it's still a lot to like about it, and a really, really strong performance out of Orlando. I would say probably easily his best performance that I've ever seen.
That I can think of at least. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
not
That's crazy.
necessarily the kind of performance you're used to from him
Not at
either. Because he lacks a lot of the charm that I think you're used to in his more famous roles. Yeah, it's an effective movie. I'm a bit mixed on it, but it is really like viscerally impactful. Josh in the live stream is bringing up Magazine Dreams as a potential point of comparison, and it's not completely off. I think Magazine Dreams has a little bit more on its mind in terms of like this character's relation to society. It's less. The Cut is less of a story of an outsider and more the story of a guy who like feels like he didn't get his shot, and also like the things that prevented him from doing what he wanted to do, right? But they're both disturbing movies in some ways. So The Cut is an interesting one. I think I responded a little bit more to the other combat sport movies. One of them is Unstoppable. This is the feature directorial debut of William Goldenberg, who is an Oscar-winning film editor. He won the Oscar for The Imitation Game, but he's worked on incredible movies from Heat to Zero Dark 30 to Transformers to Argo. It's
Don't
a
skip
guy
it.
who,
Don't skip it.
yeah,
Confessions of a Shopaholic.
the legendary film, of course. He's done a lot of really interesting films, but here he sits in the director's chair to tell the true story of NCAA wrestler Anthony Robles. I don't know if you are familiar with the story. It was like viral for a time, like 10 or so years ago. He became a champion at wrestling despite being born without a leg. So he's competing on only one leg.
Oh, damn.
And wrestling against, the top college athletes. Jarrell Jerome portrays Anthony Robles here, and Jerome is an actor who we've been hyping up since the When They See Us days. He's Moonlight even. He's been in a lot of really great. Yeah, I loved him in I'm a Virgo. He's a really great actor, and this is a really great part for him. In a lot of ways, feels kind of Oscar baity, but he does a lot with it. The film is pretty like by the numbers in terms of these like inspiring true stories of athletes who overcame the odds. What really stood out to me is just like how they were able to achieve some of the physicality behind this. Jarrell Jerome is doing this part as if he is only on one leg, and whether that's executing certain wrestling moves or climbing mountains on only one leg with crutches, it just really is so convincing in the physicality of it and in the visuals of it. It's a compelling movie for sure, and I think it's the kind of thing that will be like a really solid rental once it hits VOD. It'd probably even be a good movie to go see in theaters, but not one that really stood out to me. I know they're hoping to campaign Jennifer Lopez for an Oscar, and she's solid in it, but I don't know if it's the movie necessarily supports that kind of a.
This is the one with Matt Damon as producer and Ben Affleck.
Yes, where they held hands at the after party.
Well, Prime picked it up for December. There's just no date on it, but Prime December. So you're right. You'll be able to see it.
They'll give it a shot, but I don't know if it's quite going to break through, even though I thought it was pretty satisfying. The one that ultimately resonated with me more is The Fire Inside. Coincidentally, this is also coming from a previously Oscar-nominated craftsperson, Rachel Morrison, who was the first woman ever nominated for Best Cinematographer for her work on Mudbound. Also has shot every Ryan Coogler film, Fruitvale, Black Panther. She shot Dope. She shot Sound of My Voice. She shot the Tim and Eric movie. Here, she steps into the director's chair to tell a story that is written by Barry Jenkins. So you got the Moonlight scribe penning the script here. Interestingly, he said during the Q&A that he wrote this script before Moonlight. So this was an assignment he took on back before he kind of had his choice of whatever he could work on.
That's before Mufasa.
Yeah, well before Mufasa. Yeah. This is telling the story of Clarissa Shields, who, as a high schooler in Flint, Michigan, became the first American woman to win an Olympic gold medal in boxing. And, in some ways, it is your classic overcoming adversity to achieve success in sports story. But what ultimately makes this stand out from the flock is like she achieves those heights, and then there's like 45 minutes left in the movie. And that's where the really good stuff is, and where you see what happens after you achieve what should be this like biggest moment, greatest achievement of your career. Does it actually change your life? How does it change your life? What are the ways in which your success is not the same as the success as men who compete in your sport? And that's really what sets this film apart. It's a really inspiring and riveting true story, but it also has a lot on its mind, and it depicts it very thoughtfully. I really thought it was strong. I thought Ryan Destiny, who's making her debut here, is so convincing as Clarissa. Just really embodies the swagger of a boxer. But it's Brian Tyree Henry who kind of steals every scene he's in, playing her trainer and almost like a surrogate father of sorts. I
Mm.
mean, Tyree is just a unbelievable actor, and this is no exception to his work. He's so phenomenal in this film.
Nice. So far, I think it's MGM, right? So it could also be a Prime movie, but I know the date so
They-
far from the trailer is December 25th.
I think they did, as you mentioned, put out a trailer that has it at December 25th. So it might be one of these ones that gets like a late Oscars run. I feel like it'll mostly be just like a feel-good story for families to watch together over the holidays.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, let's hit some of the midnight movies quickly. Art, you saw this one, so you can help Amanda out. Talk a bit about The Substance, the film that took Cannes by storm from Coralie Fargiat. I'm not sure
I
how
think
to pronounce her last name.
Forget.
Yeah.
It's good.
Amanda, what do you think about it?
It's really good. I love it. But I guess for me, I thought it peaked probably before the final act, even though I still really do enjoy the final act. There's just this kind of scene where there's just lots of screaming and kicking that I had a lot of fun with. And then it kind of keeps going where I kind of expected it to go. More to the extreme. I don't know if I ever could have fully expected where the movie was going to end up going. It's really
Yeah.
funny scene with
It's
like
wild.
a cutout and some glue, and I was definitely the first person in the theater who caught on where that was going. So I'm like losing it, laughing, and people are looking at me, and then they start to slowly laugh and they realize what's happening. It is a pretty horrific body horror at times. It does set you up early on to know that it's going to go places like you were watching somebody sew a spine back together just to like they really want you to know like we're going to be going all in here, and if you can't stomach this now, like maybe this isn't going to be for you. But it has
Yeah.
unique vibe and feel to it. It kind of feels like while it is all in the horror genre, it feels like it kind of swirls through a few different as it's kind of building into like the extreme body horror that it ends up getting to in a way that escalates kind of similar to, I don't know, something you might expect from like Korean cinema, maybe, where it's like a lot of the times body horrors, you feel it kind of through the whole thing. This goes through a very steady, increased progression of how horrific it's going to end up being, but still went a little bit further than I even fully anticipated it doing. It's definitely better than the other movie that has almost not the same, but a very similar plot for this movie. It's true. Yeah. So through the lens there, it says it's just extremely relentless and doesn't give up. And that is true. I would agree that it gives Titan a run for its money. I do think that Titan probably viscerally bothered me a little bit more. But yeah, Shell is the other movie that has seemingly almost an identical plot. It ends up being a lot more obvious. It's like they say a lot of the stuff that Substance just leaves to be obvious in what you're watching. Some of it's so that Elizabeth Moss can like counter verbally, but they're saying a lot more than they're showing, and then they are showing a lot more than you ever thought they were going to show in Shell. But
I grouped these two together because they have these similar elements of it's sort of about women trying to use experimental treatments to improve or maintain their looks. I just found Shell to really lack a lot of the.
Oh, you caught that one?
Shell's the one that I caught. Amanda caught them both. Shell just sort of doesn't really do much beyond that surface level. Like it's going for dumb, campy comedy, but it ends up just feeling dumb. And maybe that contrast just feels greater because it is in a festival alongside The Substance, which is this film that people are like really raving about. But I didn't see The Substance. I only saw The Shell, and it just did not do much for me.
And I think I liked it a little more than you, even after saying that. With Shell, it gets pretty damn absurd, though. There was definitely some people in that theater because it doesn't give you the gradual, like, based on the opening scene, you can kind of see where it's going to end up going, but it still commits to it way harder than I really thought they were ever going to commit to it. And I honestly do think some of that might have been a budgetary restriction. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's almost like it was probably cheaper for them to go all the way on something than halfway on it in terms of what like makeup would have required. But yeah, it is just kind of unfortunate that it's up the same year. That was like another big theme of this festival, I find. And then even in the Netflix world with Uglies just coming out, even though that was written in like 2005, it's just this idea of like, yeah, the Uglies, but except it's more like this with the festival specifically, there's like at least 4 movies that very specifically deal with the idea of like women aging, not being able to win So it's you kind of end up in these situations where if you do nothing, people are going to comment that you're aging. And then sometimes when you try doing things to stop that aging from happening, people are going to comment on it and make fun of you for that too. So a lot of women just kind of end up in this place where they can't win. And you do kind of wish you could just freeze yourself in time or find some way to be the perfect version of yourself. Cause like we can't use beards to cover the sag. Like we got nothing, you know? But so it's an
You'll
interesting
have
theme. And it's
contour.
just, you've got to can only get you so far, man. Can only get you so far. I don't know. I'm holding up. I don't wear makeup, so like once I start, that's when you know it's like
That's
hiding
it.
something now. That's something's being hidden now. But yeah, it was an interesting festival for those themes, and I think some of the movies, even some of the ones I didn't love that much, handled the topic really well. In terms of how it was expressing itself, and the substance definitely one of them. I can see how it's not going to work for everyone. I do want to stress it is like it goes full body
Yeah.
horror. It gets very intense. It gets very gross, but it's very cool. It has some very cool editing every time they talk about the substance and how it's like cutting in imagery and like the
She
voice
edited
behind
it
the
also,
substance.
yeah.
It's really solid editing. I think this is literally Demi like you've never seen her. This is Margaret Qualley
She's
doing
great.
what we know she can do, or Qualley to the
Mhm.
extreme. I love Margaret. I always have. So it was good to kind of see her
You need
in
that
this.
montage of all
Yeah.
of her yelling for sure.
Yeah. I
Because
love
this
the
is a great
yelling.
performance.
It's a great
100%.
performance. We got Pump It Up, you know, it's good.
That's sick. That's
Easy
fire. I like that.
recommend if you like body horror, if you like any kind of horror, it's worth checking out for sure.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of her previous movie. The director, Corley, did Revenge, and I thought that
Revenge.
was
Mhm.
fantastic. Because as Amanda's saying, if you don't like body horror, just know that before going in. I feel people didn't know that before going in, but you're reading a lot of 1 stars where it's not, I saw a sci-fi movie when I don't like space. They're reacting to what the story is, and I'm here to tell you, like, I've seen a lot of people call it like male gaze or whatever else it needs to be. Nah, like Dennis Quaid answers so many of
Oh
those
my
questions
god.
in this
He
film,
does.
and he is so incredible. So it's crazy to find out that he was supposed to be Ray Liotta before he passed.
Mm.
So the fact that Dennis Quaid comes in and just kills it, some of the most disgusting, vile
So
stuff is just him
disgusting.
eating. It's just him
Yeah,
eating.
it was vile. It was vile. Oddly enough,
Yeah,
eating lobster.
but
That doesn't mean
Coralie,
anything to some of you, but it
yeah,
will.
Coralie, I think it she's smarter than most of the people who are commenting on this not being feminist enough. What she did in Revenge and what she does in this movie, she knows her history so well. She's inverting so much stuff. And what's
I
crazy about The
agree.
Substance is that it's using body horror as a way to not just really talk about the industry. We already know that. It's talking
Mhm.
about the effect it has on the individual. And it's a
That's
body
it.
horror where the violence is what you do when you see yourself that way and the
That's
violence you're doing on
exactly it.
yourself.
That's
And
exactly it.
it's fantastic. Zach, I'm excited for you to watch it.
I hope you
I'm
like
very
it.
excited.
I'm like
Yeah,
a toss
that's my
up on
screening
Zach
tonight.
loving or hating it. I don't know. Zach, weren't you supposed to be gone?
No, I can stay for another 20 minutes.
All right,
Okay,
let's
cool.
go. So Substance,
All right.
very good. I'm looking forward to the show as well. I liked
I
Max, the
liked it
director.
more. I did like it more than I think Zach or Caitlin did.
Yeah.
But it is rough that it's going up against the substance, like very specifically because it is trying to
Yeah.
do so
It's
much the same
it's not without its stronger
charms.
elements. Like it kind of it has these production designs of a slightly futuristic world, like maybe like a 10 years into the future design where there's all these little touches that are pretty interesting. And I don't know. I mean, I like Elizabeth Moss. I think Kate Hudson is also very fun in this
I like
movie,
Kate Hudson a
but
lot in the movie.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I just think ultimately like the writing lets them down a bit in the end. But
Yeah.
yeah. Hitting a couple of these other midnight movies quickly. Art, you're the only one of us who saw Dead Talent Society,
No, I
a
saw it. I
story
saw it.
about. Well, you saw it too.
I
Okay,
did. Yeah, I just haven't logged it yet.
that
It was
would
one of the
explain
last minute
that.
catches.
But Art,
It's
I
cute.
think you liked it.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on what happens when you have influencers in the afterlife. Just because you
Mhm.
died, it doesn't mean those worries go away. And it's
Yeah.
primarily 2 really big people. One who gets a protege, and then the protege outdoes her in terms of the influencer space because she wants to keep it to the classic scares. It's like Monsters Inc. And then she wants to
A
do it
little
on the
bit.
internet. But then we follow this like random girl who's just never been anything, and it's goofy, but I found it to be really fun, and it inverts a lot of different things. I may have it wrong, but the one part that really got me was when they're trying to cross overseas because it is very, I think it's Japanese, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's Japanese. Yeah.
They try to cross over to America, and they have this influencer who shouts out, "What, Ghost Surf Ghost VPN to protect you from hauntings online. And I was like, all right, there are pockets in this movie that are really funny, and then others that are just they're goofy.
Oh,
But I thought it was
Taiwan, sorry,
enjoyable.
it's Taiwanese, it's
Taiwan,
Taiwanese. I wanna make sure that
uh,
we give people
for
the
sure.
appropriate credit. It's the Gasuidos is Japanese, sorry.
It's
Right,
just
right.
it's
Yeah.
really funny in the way that it plays with a lot of callbacks to not just current things that we have in the online sphere, but it makes fun of a lot of horrors as well, J horrors, and a lot of the iconography that we've
Which
seen.
I
So
like. I like
yeah,
stuff like that, so I was fully on board for this. I do like it when it just kinda has that feel of, like, almost like a live action anime, even if it isn't Japanese, it
yeah,
just kinda has that vibe and it works well. Yeah.
it's quirky. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
Another one of
Explain
the
this
midnight
though.
movies. Yeah, another one of the
I'm
midnight
out.
movies
I
was
skipped.
it doesn't get any better than this. This one kind of intrigued me. Chase was telling me about this, that the producers don't plan for this film to ever be released online. They want
And
this one
we
to
see
be,
why now.
yeah, they want it to be touring forever, theaters forever, like Memoria or something.
Which is
And
online.
that was enough of a gimmick to get me into the door, and I guess I kind of wish it hadn't, because I'm not so sure about this one. There's some cool ideas here, right? Like the essential idea here is they're going for a almost modernized Blair Witch Project thing about this group of friends that are trying to conjure a ghost. It's all done in sort of like a shaky personal camera POV. They credit themselves as directed by Rachel and Nick and Christian, not their full names. So you're just referring to them by first names, like you're friends with them too, or something like
Ah,
that. And like there's no like really nicely choreographed shots or whatever. Like it's all done in a very home video found footage type of style about these horror nerds who want to uh, develop a connection to the other side, open up the help mouth or whatever. But it's just Blair Witch Project with the most annoying horror nerds you've ever met. Like the Rachel in particular just cackle at every new development, just becomes so grating, and part of that is in the sound mix. And ultimately, I feel comfortable saying that this movie does not work for me, even though there are some cool ideas at play here. There's some people who liked it more than me. I just found it to be a real slog. Like you're one of those movies where you're just kind of waiting for them to get to the point. I think you could even take this exact film and cut it down to a 20-minute killer short, but I just don't need to see you sitting for 2 minutes straight before the candlelight comes on or something like that. That all being said, I might not have seen the right version of this movie. Never has this happened to me at any film festival. But after I saw this movie, I got an email that said they
insane.
screened the wrong version of
It's
this
so
movie.
dumb.
They did
Yeah.
not screen the final cut for critics. But after investing 2 hours into this like extremely boring found footage horror film, I was just not going to go back and watch another 2 hours of it. Chase,
Isn't it only 80
thankfully,
minutes? It's 89 minutes.
it
It's
feels like 2
yeah.
hours.
That's what I hear it
Um,
feels. Yeah, Chase, said that I don't think anything changed that much. It was still just as obnoxiously loud, really poorly sound mixed,
He
and
saw
he
it
got out and
twice.
immediately he no, he didn't go to the same one as them. He went to a
yeah.
ticketed version, and he came out and he sucked back a spicy marg real fast when he was done with
Mm,
that. But,
Yeah,
at
we
first I
were
thought it was good. When I saw the email saying we've added an additional press screening of this tomorrow morning, I was like, "Oh, it must be doing so well if they're adding a press screening immediately." And then it was just like, "No, they played the wrong version of the movie."
yeah, it was uh I don't know, man. It just did not work for me, even though there's some cool ideas there. Like there's some moments of genuine lo-fi horror creepiness. It's just surrounded by like watching people shakily walk around an abandoned home, and it just bores. It ultimately bores.
How does it
yeah.
compare to Dashcam, the
That's
one
also
from
one
TIFF
of
from a
So
those.
few years ago?
Dashcam is
That
probably a
was
pretty
TIFF
good
too.
comparison. Yeah, that was TIFF.
Yeah, it was TIFF.
In that, like, even for the elements of the production that I found to be intriguing, ultimately they were drowned out by just a general distaste for the characters and for the
Mhm.
dialogue, and just that how grating I found it was a lot higher than how intriguing I found it.
Grating.
So
Okay, because Dash Cam was grating as hell. Because that girl is
yeah,
grating as
so
hell, and I hear it's kind of the same thing here. Is that the woman specifically is very grating in this, but
yeah, and
And she's
it's
director.
no shade to you, no
yeah.
shade to you, ma'am. I just heard it's because your
Yeah,
voice is louder than everything.
I mean, it's not like her performance so much as it is like the characters they've written, because their response to like genuinely unexplainable paranormal is to cackle with laughter, and it just at a certain point it's like, can you exist in the world of your own movie? Um, yeah, I wouldn't recommend. It doesn't get any better than this, even if you're only going to get a chance to see it in theaters. Probably wait until they eventually give up and put it on VOD. The midnight movies I enjoyed more were comedies. I really enjoyed Friendship, the new comedy starring Tim Robinson. Kate Mara and Paul Rudd are in this as well, but it really is the Tim Robinson show. In many ways, this feels like a feature-length
Nice.
adaptation of a I think you should leave sketch, and that is a compliment, because
Yeah, in a good way.
He's doubling down on that idea of like the stubbornness that he often has in I think you should leave, the inability to admit when something is wrong, and he does it to the most maximally hilarious extent here. There's so many things in this film that are like not really jokes, but they're hysterical, and if you like just picture Tim Robinson saying them, they're so funny. Like that he exclusively wears clothes from Outdoor Design Living or something, or Outdoor Dining View or something like that. I messed up
Outdoor,
that line, but like
it's like ocean something
Ocean
dining. It's
something
like ocean
dining.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the only clothes
yeah,
that fit
and
me.
it was
Or
the only clothes that fit me. And then they don't actually look that good on him, so it's like an added layer. He's just got this massive
yeah.
parka. He's like, oh, balls, what have you more?
Or that he keeps talking about the new Marvel movie, which is like literally nuts. It's actually making people go crazy. It's like it's not necessarily like the funniest line, but he has an ability to deliver these lines in hysterical ways. Definitely cool to see him sort of outside of the norms of the realm of his writing, still able to just be hysterically funny. And I got to shout out the writer director Andrew DeYoung, who has done a lot of work on shows and stuff that I like. He was a writer on the other two. He was a writer on the John Early Kate Berlant special. Would it kill you to laugh? He was a writer on Pen
So
15, and
funny.
I love that for you. And Our Flag Means Death. So he's got a really good resume. Absolutely nailed it here. It's so funny. The story is very like paper thin, but it's just kind of an excuse to get you from gag to gag, and the gags really deliver. It has maybe the funniest drug trip sequence I've seen in a movie in quite some time.
Because I was like, oh no, I hate drug trip scenes. But then it happens, and I was like, that was perfect. That was
It's
the best I
so
ever could have possibly imagined. I'm so happy right now.
yeah.
But yeah, just not even to spoil it, but just kind of like the inspiration that went into it was basically the person writing it worked a job and then left the job and tried to reach out to somebody that he thought was a friend that was a coworker, only to find out that the dude was like, yeah, I talked to you because we worked together. I have no interest in talking to you now. And kind of like building off of that idea. And it almost takes
Mhm.
place in a way that at first I thought that like Paul Rudd might have been that character. And I thought it would have been an interesting flip
Right.
to have Tim Robinson being the one being like, oh, I don't want to be anywhere near this person. But it's how it kind of like weaves into, how invested he gets into this friendship. It's delightful and hilarious.
Yeah.
I saw it with a great crowd, which really helped. So
Yeah. I've been saying it's like a reverse I love you man. Like it's more like I don't love you man.
yeah,
But it's so good. A24 just picked this one up, so hopefully people will get a
Fire.
chance to see it soon. They
yeah,
said it's
I'm
coming
glad.
soon, so maybe that means this year. I don't know. I'm
Cool,
very
because I was
excited.
worried that Netflix was just gonna grab it because they have all the "I Think You Should Leave" stuff, so it just feels like it would be a good companion to that. But I'm glad that it's gonna end up in theaters where people can see it
Yeah.
together. But yeah.
Exactly. And then a super, super quick shout out for a movie that was not technically a part of TIFF. It was part of Midnight Dankness, the event that Peter Kaplowski, the head of Midnight Madness, helps
Mhm.
throw in the night before TIFF. But I managed to make it out for the Toronto premiere of Rap World, the new feature film from Friendship co-star Connor O'Malley. And it is absolutely hysterical if you like the work of Connor O'Malley. He just has this innate gift for making these absurd situations with these outlandish characters somehow feel like the most relatable, unremarked upon things you can think of. Like, there's this line in the film where one of the characters says, "Some of the best nights were had in parking lots," and it's a hilarious thing to say, but it's also so true. Like, parking lots are great. I love hanging out in a parking lot, you know?
Flashbacks, bro.
Yeah, those moments where like you're just kind of waiting for everybody to go their separate ways and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's perfect. So shout out to Rap World, put that on your radar. But let's talk quickly about some of the acclaimed filmmakers who had films at TIFF. What stand out for me was David Mackenzie's new movie starring Riz Ahmed called Relay. It is sort of it reminded me at first a bit of like classic corporate crisis movies like Michael Clayton or Margin Call, that are very like talky but tense, and there's sort of just an edge of your seat nature as they try to fix this looming problem, and competing interests come into play. And then towards the end, it kind of spills more into like 90s action thriller territory, almost like Michael Mannish. I know you were talking about some Amanda, you were talking about some of the 90s thrillers that it reminded you of too.
Yeah, like a little bit Pelican Brief, but better. Like just kind of that
Yeah.
vibe of like characters just kind of ending up in interesting situations, and it's like very good. It just reminded me of those like 90s thrillers that you're like on Netflix and you're like, oh, I'll catch that one, you know? It was interesting. It was good.
Not the splashiest movie by any means, but really satisfying. Like, put it on, sit back, stay engaged the whole time. Cool movie to watch with your dad. I'd recommend it for sure. I also really like the end, which puts me in a bit of an outlier, because I think people did not respond to the new movie from Joshua Oppenheimer, a post-apocalyptic musical set in a bunker in a salt mine. But I actually thought this was like a pretty interesting marriage of like a Stephen Sondheim style musical with like a Ruben Ostlund style class satire.
It's a musical.
It's a musical.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And it sort of has all these elements where it's like these rich people who've tried to inoculate themselves to the problems they helped create, and they've tried to create this like perfect little oasis from themselves, but the world can't help but find its way in. And I just thought there was a lot of really fascinating ideas. It's definitely over long. Speaking of long movies at TIFF, this was another 2.5 hour one, and it does not need to be. But I don't know. I just found a lot of it to be really compelling. It's a tough one to recommend. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I think there's something special there. So keep it on your radar. Bird is the new film from Andrea Arnold, the American Honey and Fish Tank director. This one is a story of a few people living in North Kent, particularly 12-year-old Bailey, who's dealing with life in her fractured home. Her dad is played by Barry Keoghan, and it's
Keoghan.
And she comes across a interesting drifter whose name is Bird, played by Franz Rogowski. And I thought Franz was a real standout in this movie.
Always.
He plays the part with so much mystery that you just can't help but lean into the character a little bit. But this is like an Andrea Arnold movie through and through. There's like a poetic quality to the way it's assembled, from how it's shot to sort of the metaphor-laced dialogue and stuff like that. I responded to this one. I thought it was pretty good. Amanda, did you like it too?
I did. I really liked it. I related to kind of not Bailey's entire life, but just certain aspects of being kind of like more of that like tomboy growing up. So there's just a lot of aspects of like her coming of age story that I related to, but I thought it was just really well handled. Again, the needle drops. I finally remembered the band. The needle drop is the song "Too Real" by Fontaines DC, which is like an Irish punk band type thing. So I really like that. It's really interesting, especially like Barry Keoghan's character has this harshness of not being the best dad, but then you can tell that he does genuinely care about the kids and trying to keep them together. So it's just a very interesting progression. It does a little surrealism that I wasn't expecting, supernatural-ishness that I feel like a lot of people aren't expecting, but I think it works. But I just want to put the warning out there that like it'll kind of hit a point at the end where you're like, oh, okay, but it works well. I find it works well thematically for the story, and they tease it throughout. But but yeah, I really liked it. I was really moved by it. It kind of has a similar feeling to um not Cha Cha Real Smooth, but the Rye Lane, where it almost feels like the
Mm,
city is a personality and a character within itself. You're kind of getting a good vibe for all of these different people and how they interact with community and the ups and the downs of that. So I liked it quite a bit.
definitely.
It's like her Scrapper.
Yeah, there's definitely
Yeah, it
elements
kind
of
of has a
that.
little bit of a Scrapper vibe.
Totally.
Mhm.
But with that added magical realism element to it too.
That's the word.
That'll be
Magical
coming out
realism.
November 8th.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Another movie with a set release date, I believe, is Babygirl. That's coming out
Speaking
around
of Scrapper,
Christmas. This one is the new one from
Who's better in
Helena
Scrapper?
Rain, who more recently gave us Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And this film is a new one with Nicole Kidman as a high-powered CEO who begins an affair with intern Harris Dickinson.
my boy.
I ended up liking this one quite a bit. I
My
think it's a
boy.
really interesting movie about the shame that we hold on to and how that often gets in our inhibits our ability to communicate with one another. It's a really compelling sexual thriller that feels in some ways like a throwback to Paul Verhoeven movies and to Adrian Lyne movies. So I really ended up enjoying this. Amanda, I know you had some issues with like the characters and their
Yeah.
believability.
It's I feel like it has vignettes of really amazing moments, and I love like the messaging behind it and what it's going for. But I guess I just didn't believe some of the execution, particularly like on Harris Dickinson's side. I guess
Mhm.
I don't know. I just had some issues there, how the progression went built up. But maybe I'd like it more on repeat watching. But I just found myself kind of confused for most of the, you know, I don't know. My kind of freak flag was more in the sanctuary realm of things, but I do really appreciate what Babygirl is going for because again, that's one of the other ones that speaks to the idea of like women really not being able to win in a lot of different ways in terms of when it comes to their appearance, their look, their own bodily autonomy and agency. So I thought it was interesting how they explored that. I just kind of wish the buildup had been better, and I don't know. I just don't really like the way that Harris Dickinson character was written for most of the movie.
I could hear that, even though I ended up enjoying it.
Mhm.
All right,
I
so we
didn't
got a
hate it, by
couple.
the way. I was like,
Yeah,
I'm like a 3, probably a 3 out of 5. So
yeah, just more negative than us. I mean, Caitlin came out
yeah,
of that one thinking
I
that
got
was
like
the
a
best
four
thing
and a
she
half.
saw here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I think we'll bump some of these movies to Thursday, but I do want to hit on at least briefly before we go. Cloud, the Kiyoshi
Oh
Kurosawa
yes.
film, which Art, I know that's one of the best one, maybe the best one that you got to catch.
I have it a little bit lower than the substance, but this being
Okay.
Japan's submission, definitely one that I
Mhm.
think at least before the shortlist come out that I'm rooting for because it is about a guy who's pretty much flipping. He's reselling a lot of stuff and obviously cutting corners or doing the things that he needs to do in order to be able to get away with it. And it's about how
Mhm.
many people around him is he able to trust and how many enemies is he making before that second half that takes such a tense turn that honestly only Kiyoshi could do. So I found it to be really engaging. I think it was Chase who had called it like Prime. It was on Prime. Basil's like coming of age story if there was one.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I thought it was pretty solid. It's a very good thriller.
Nice. And then the opening night film at the Toronto International Film Festival was Nutcrackers, which is the new David Gordon Green family comedy. He's sort of abandoned the horror run he's been on and returned to something a little more similar to his roots here, with Ben Stiller serving as the de facto dad to 4 young kids after they become orphaned. And there's some charm to it. It's kind of your average like found family comedy, and Ben Stiller is in Meet the Parents mode, so like there's some good jokes there for sure, but it just doesn't really feel original. It doesn't really feel inspired. It just it ultimately just doesn't really do that
It
much
feels Netflix.
compelling. Yeah, it feels very Netflix. It feels very Hulu, and Hulu ended up paying 8 figures for this one. They're
Sheesh,
planning to
sir.
release it around Christmas. Feels like an overpay to me. I kind of feel like this is going to be one of those movies that kind of just comes and goes, but it's watchable. Like it's not offensive or
It'll do
super
well in the
annoying.
holiday season with families,
Yeah,
but like 8 figures.
Yeah, definitely an unremarkable opening night movie for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a bit of a letdown because I was hopeful, given that Ben Stiller is not doing that much in front of the camera anymore, that he would return for a better reason than this one. But look, it still is better than at least the last 4 David Gordon Green movies, if you ask me. So maybe that's something.
So Ben did it so he could delay Severance season 2.
Yeah, exactly. He needed something to do during the break, right?
Ridiculous.
All right, so there's a bunch of Oscar hopefuls that we'll try to cover on Thursday, and then a few more movies that fell through the cracks. So by Thursday, I'll have seen Brutalist, so I'll be able to join y'all in that discussion. I'm really excited
Nice.
to talk
Yeah, 'cause
Brutalist,
we
to
haven't
talk
touched on
Conclave, to talk
Heretic. Yeah.
Night Bitch or Piano Lesson or a whole bunch of others. Sketch, the most underrated movie in Toronto. Sketch.
Good.
Or Do I Know You From Somewhere, which is another good one that we wanted to shout out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
just 'cause
we will
for biases,
go ahead.
but it's still good. I said we were shouting it
Yeah.
out for biases, but we like it. Art
Yeah.
actually liked it. I did actually like it. That sounds like I didn't actually like it, but my
What?
review is biased because I know the people who made it, so I like it a lot.
The director?
But I don't know if
it
Art
is
knew
really
that
good.
and Art
All
liked
of
it.
them. All of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this
So
Canadian?
the director, the director and the writer are married, and the writer edits some of my videos. So I'm friends with pretty much
Gotcha.
all of them. So yeah.
Yeah, I would put that with a good double feature alongside this other movie called You Are Not Alone. I think they both have very similar
Mm,
uh
I could see that.
topics, and this idea of like when you have someone that you invest so much time in, are you not dying once they're no longer there?
Mhm.
Very compelling log line. Yeah, we'll talk more about some of the other films that we didn't get to yet later this week. But thanks for checking out at least the first part of our TIFF recap. I gotta go see The Substance.
Get out of here.
Art's also
get out of here.
going to go see a movie too.
Mine's a Superman movie.
That about does it for this edition of Intercut. Make sure you're following Intercut across social media at Intercut Pod. That's Intercut POD, which is short for podcast. We're available on pretty much every social platform, including Patreon, where you can support the show for as little as $3 a month. It goes a
Ooh.
long way to helping the show and making sure we can still keep going to festivals like TIFF and bringing you coverage and letting you know what movies to add to your watch list. But if you don't want to go all the way to Patreon, you can stay right here on YouTube and click that join button to become a member as well. And that also gets you access to episodes before they're publicly available, as well as our monthly Intercutie video chats. Make sure you're following us. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you leave us 5 stars if you're reviewing on iTunes or Spotify. A thumbs up if you're right here on YouTube. And yeah, do all the other Discord. I didn't mention Discord. Check
I
out
thought
our
you was just
Discord.
about
There's
to
a link to
dip.
that in the description. I'm a
already know,
dip
bye.
so yeah, but thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, we'll see you climbing up the stairs to the balcony at Princess of Wales.
Beautiful.